Hi guys, and welcome back to this week's episode of Let's Chat Ethics. I'm your co-host Ariana.
And I'm your other co-host Amanda. And this week we're going to talk about the Facebook lawsuit. So for anybody who hasn't heard, the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission in the US, has sued Facebook for illegal monopolization. This a word. So the lawsuit is from the 9th of December, so that's like just over a week ago actually. And the basis for the suit is that Facebook is illegally maintaining a monopoly over the social network industry by having bought Instagram and WhatsApp, and that's it, right? Do they own any other social networks? I guess those are the biggest, but basically Facebook has made something like 70 billion in the last year through having this monopoly over social media. So, if you think about it, outside of, I guess TikTok is pretty big right now, but besides that there is Instagram, and I guess Facebook itself. It's still pretty big, but I think it's not as popular with younger people anymore. I think it's more seen as like your parents' parents and grandparents. That's where they go. I remember when Facebook was cool. Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. I think there's been the idea behind this lawsuit is, I guess, to get Facebook broken up into smaller companies. And one of the Facebook founders or co-founders, I think, last year or a couple of years ago, wrote an opinion piece on the New York Times asking for Facebook to be broken up into different companies. I don't know if you remember that article, Ariana.
Yeah, I do remember that.
So it's pretty interesting that I guess it's taken, I think it's 2 years for the FTC to kind of catch up. But basically the FTC, they've posted an article on their own website kind of detailing the point of the lawsuit. So their whole point is, of course, that by having this monopoly, so owning WhatsApp and Instagram, Facebook is harming the competition and leaving consumers with few choices for personal social networking, as well as depriving advertisers of the benefits of competition. So, of course, Facebook, Instagram, they're massive advertisement companies. And another thing that's mentioned in the lawsuit is that they're actually, they make developers sign non-compete agreements, I think, or yeah, they do. So they impose anti-competitive conditions on software developers, so that way they can't ask for higher salaries because they're not allowed to work for another company anyway. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, actually, when you bring this up, it made me think of when Facebook's mentioned, everyone thinks Cambridge Analytica. But yeah, going to say the Cambridge Analytica thing. That when that happened, my actually immediate instinct was to delete Facebook, which I did. And then I realised, but that means I might have to delete Instagram. Did I want to delete Instagram? No. And like you said, Facebook is not a social network that I use ever, really, and haven't done for a few years now. But back in the day, I did. Whereas kind of Instagram is something that I use far often, and like most of my friends or people I know, we maybe have contact more through Instagram. So yeah, when you think of the monopoly, and of course WhatsApp, I also speak to pretty much all my friends worldwide on WhatsApp. So again, if I'm having WhatsApp and I'm having Instagram, that's my kind of point for deleting Facebook was redundant, really. But that, yeah, so actually speaking about that makes me think that, yeah, you shouldn't really be having these huge monopolies in tech, because the big, like we've spoken about before, the big tech is only actually a small few. And for Facebook to have that much power over three really, really like astronomical social networks, it doesn't really seem the right way to be. Because when scandals and things happen, people don't really have that much autonomy over how they choose to deal with it when they're owning like three of the biggest networks, really. So and like you were saying with the non-competes, that just is so unfair, like so unfair. And I know that's an issue in a lot of big companies and big tech companies where they do the non-competes, and that causes so many issues because where can people go? What can they do after that if there's a non-compete? And it causes just really unfair ultimately. And onto the money point, should a company, is it really ethically and morally right that in a pandemic as well, in the year of 2020, that one company is making that much money while other people are literally struggling to, people are struggling to get food on the table? Like, I just saw that in the UK, UNICEF for the first time are actually going to be donating food for the first time in history to children in the UK who are starving, and that's never happened before. So it's just, things like that in the middle of a pandemic, to then hear that a company's earning that much money is just crazy. So I completely am all for the breaking up of Facebook on that extent.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think the lawsuit, I mean, I would imagine that it's going in the direction of getting Facebook actually split up, but right now they're, I think, seeking for Facebook to have to get approval for any they need to give prior notice and get approval for future mergers and acquisitions. I think they'll be banned from imposing the anti-competitive conditions on the software developers. No, I am wrong, actually. It does require divestitures of assets, including Instagram and WhatsApp, which I think means they want to separate them out, right? So I think that's very interesting. I wonder if they'll do something similar with Google, because I would argue that they also have kind of a monopoly over a lot of services. I mean,
they do, and even Amazon has a bit of a monopoly. Even now, the fact they've taken over for a while now, Whole Foods, and they're just vastly creeping into every sector. Really, I think that's the problem when you give any, not just big tech, but any big corporation taking on certain powers. I think this year 2020 has certainly showed us how the big companies in general have benefited rather than smaller businesses. So even in lockdown, everyone's go-to was obviously like the bigger companies, bigger tech companies. So I think when these companies have such monopolies, it just ultimately doesn't really do the world as a whole actual favour. It's very much convenient for consumers in the moment, but then actually for us as a whole, long term, it doesn't really have the most beneficial impact.
Yeah, I think also if we look at it in terms of the things that are going to allow companies to grow, we've mentioned in previous episodes that somebody compared data, or like the value of data, to oil and the value of oil. And in fact, data is now sort of more valuable than oil. And it's bigger companies that are going to have more data, obviously, because they have, I think Facebook has like 2 billion users or something, maybe even more. So imagine having that much data over people's, obviously their Facebook, their Instagram, maybe their WhatsApp. I'm not sure what happened. I think WhatsApp messages are not encrypted or anything as well. So
I think they are actually encrypted.
They are now?
Yeah.
I think they didn't used to be.
Yeah,
because I know a lot of people use Signal because of that now. Okay, but basically I think my point with this, I guess, was that having all this data and all this access to data actually allows the companies to grow faster as well than if you have a smaller company that is struggling to gather the data. Then obviously that sort of stifles their growth. And I think there's been some talk about data poverty recently, and how can we help smaller businesses get started. I think there's also something inherently wrong with the system. So I think a lot of the time when we think about the like Silicon Valley companies, even something like Facebook, right? They're companies that were started up in somebody's garage or their dorm room. And the nice thing about tech companies is that usually it's something that's relatively easy and low resource to start on your own, and you don't need a huge investment from the beginning. In fact, you can do a lot of it just with your laptop. But then the idea with those is that you're going to sell them to someone for many, many, many millions, and who is that going to be? It's likely going to be a company like Facebook or Google that are going to be buying up the competition, which I guess is kind of what happened with Instagram. As it was becoming really popular, Facebook snatched it up. And what happens with a lot of smaller companies is also that, somebody like Google might buy them, like, remember Google bought over DeepMind and that kind of thing. So I wonder, to what extent this is sort of inevitable with the model and the idea of the tech startup.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is what we spoke about in that episode about the algorithmic colonization of Africa. And I know that was something that Vanna Bartoletti had spoken about in her book as well. And basically talking about how, a lot of the tech scene in Nigeria that's starting to boom, and a lot of African tech companies are now being bought up by really, really like bigger firms based in Europe. So they were kind of saying like how truly African are these countries, and kind of comparing it to colonialism, where you have the bigger companies then coming in who are from the West and just taking over. And I think on one side you can see it as a win, like you're saying, like someone started a startup in their garage or something, and they're being like really working hard, and maybe for however many years trying to get money, and then who in some cases you can't blame people who wouldn't want to get bought out at some point for millions, maybe billions, if you've worked that hard and that's your dream. But on the flip side, then it just means we go back to this kind of cycle of then all the tech companies, startups, whatever, are owned by a small few. So then again, I guess it links us back into the other episodes of how can we trust their work? How can we actually have a bit of diversity in opinion if it's all run by the same people worldwide, kind of making the same decisions? So it doesn't really actually reflect what we really need. So but like you said, it's true. It's hard to think of many cases where this kind of monopoly doesn't seem to happen, because it's not just tech. This happens in most sectors, really, doesn't it? So that people buy the smaller ones out when they start to do well. So, but it's not. Well, this is what I guess has led to where we are in the state of the world, where we're only having a few 1% making all the money.
Yeah, I think it's basically a vicious cycle, right? The more money you have, the more you can buy up the competition, and that's kind of the way things are. So I guess it makes sense for the government to try to regulate that when you're dependent on competition to, offer the best options for consumers. And the FTC, their argument is that the lack of competition is actually stopping further innovation because there's no competition, so there's no need to innovate in that sense. So I think it's a good idea. I'm gonna keep following the lawsuit because I think it's kind of, I don't want to say unprecedented, because I think the government has interfered in this way with other companies, but I think it's been a while, and it's certainly the first time it happens in tech, as far as I know. So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bold and good move that we do need. I mean, everyone's been screaming for this forever in the tech industry. We need actual government regulation on every level, because up to this point, kind of, they have been running wild, and I guess that's why big tech is and has been the way it is because it hasn't had much regulation, especially in the US anyway. This is why I think it's quite a bold move for the US. Like I know the European Union's put sanctions and has even fined Google and is fining Google right now actually for certain data breaches. But the US is always the government seems to be a bit set behind sometimes with this. So this is quite a bold move for the US government to actually be doing that.
Yeah, I guess this is one of the cases where you see a big difference in the culture, the ideology of the two. I don't want to say countries, but yeah, the two continents. Sorry. Yeah, that the US is only just, and actually even the way what they're going after the big tech for is not the same thing, right? It's not for them. It's not a problem with ethics or data. Is about the lack of competition. They're kind of enforcing, quote unquote, better capitalism. I guess so. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so the other thing we wanted to kind of quickly talk about on this episode was some news that came out last week, and I actually had a few friends sending me the article and asking actually if we could talk about this. And Amanda sent me the article as well. So yeah, it's basically that Japan are going to, well, the headlines, Japan are going to fund AI matchmaking to boost their slowing birth rate. And as the article explains, that over the past however many years, in the last year, they're actually saying that Japan's rate fell below 865,000, which is a record low. BBC are reporting that actually this is due to a number of reasons. One of them being that actually women's rights and equality are one of the lowest in the world now, which is really surprising. I was personally really, really surprised by reading that. And a lot of women feel like they can't have the families that they might want to, and they're actually kind of avoiding that because they don't have the same rights as other countries in terms of going into work. So yeah, this plan for the AI matchmaking seems an interesting one to me. I'm not sure it's really getting to the roots of the problem. What are your thoughts on it, Amanda?
So this was really interesting, right? So what their idea to solve the problem of low birth rate is that sorry, it just seems so. They would rather give a few million to startups that are using AI for matchmaking than solving one of the issues, which is the gender equality problem, right? So, and I think generally having young people more employed and making more money, but especially women. So I was quite shocked by the report. So Japan ranked 121st out of 153 countries in terms of gender equality, and this was a report by the World Economic Forum, and that is like shockingly low. So I actually pulled up the report, and Japan is even below the United Arab Emirates. Yeah, and even when you look at the report even breaks it up into different categories, and Japan does really poorly in every category except for the health of the person. So they rank them in terms of their economic participation and opportunity, their educational attainment, their health and survival, and their political empowerment. And Japan only does sort of okay in the health the health index, which is just crazy. And I mean, in that case, they are 40th in the world, which I think is pretty good. But yeah, it seems to me like the obvious choice here would be to fight for women's equality. I also wonder, in terms of actually the AI, if we move away, let's assume, let's imagine a scenario in which Japan has gender equality and at like Swedish levels, or maybe at least at normal European levels, for example, and they still want to fund AI matching. I wonder if this would work. I mean, I don't think like attraction is that mathematical and like matchmaking. Um,
I wonder though, because I was really like pondering this article for a while actually, because at first my first reaction was, oh, how ridiculous. But then I got thinking about it and was like, actually, Tinder and Hinge and Bumble and all these other apps actually are, powered by AI. And the algorithm, obviously, I know on Hinge, the algorithm, obviously, the more you, swipe right to a certain type of person, whether that's on, like what they look, well, sorry, that is on what they look like. Or maybe you might swipe right, but it's on their bio. But I think most people tend to be a bit more shallow and swipe on depending on the person's look. So obviously, then it starts filtering. So if you're swiping right all the time on, say, a Caucasian male, then you're going to get Caucasian males mainly coming into your feed. So I think, yeah. So I was just thinking that actually a lot of people tend to then actually find successful dates, and I know quite a lot of people have ended up in relationships, and I've heard loads of people who've even got married from these dating apps. And now we seemingly seem to live in a generation where dating apps are more popular than meeting people in like a bar or at work, like I guess the traditional ways of through friends and work. And it seems to be, with the busy and hectic lives that people live, the new way of kind of connecting. So I wonder if this is what Joanne is suggesting, that different. If we take it on the AI level, obviously I think they should be getting to the actual root of their gender inequality issues. And like I know we've said before, like AI should not be seen as this like superpower that can solve all issues. And this is something that they should get to the root of the problem. But in terms of the matchmaking side, is it that different from, I guess, Hinge and Tinder and Bumble?
I mean, I think the problem I have with dating apps is, and I mean, for example, I've never used Hinge, to be clear, so I'm talking. If I'm not necessarily talking about Hinge, but I would assume it's probably relatively different, like, relatively similar. They're all kind of on some level sort of the same, right? So even if a few people that have ended up in relationships or maybe married from having met on these apps, I think if you think about it in terms of numbers, probably the percentage of people that end up matched and end up having a good relationship is very small, because people on apps tend to swipe for looks, not for personality. And I even found, I don't know, at some point I was trying out Bumble BFF, and that's just the function on Bumble to make friends. And even for that, I was very focused on people's pictures, which was weird. Why would I care about physically how somebody that I want to be friends with might look? And that's bizarre, right? Whereas when you meet in real life, and in a bar or through friends or something, you already have this kind of commonality. Whereas, so I would venture to say that probably the success rate of real life dating is better in terms of percentage. I also read, I don't remember on which blog I read this, but it was very interesting about the kind of the mathematics of dating apps, where, because basically the top 80% of women are fighting for the top 20% of men, and so the bottom 20% of men only have the bottom 20% of women to try and match with. And I think also one of the ways the app ranks where you come up in the list of people that you're getting shown to is how long have you been on the dating app. So if you've been on Tinder for longer, then fewer and fewer and fewer people will find you, actually.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting you say that. people I know who have been on certain dating apps for a while have actually complained to me about that, saying, oh my God, like I keep getting, no matches, or everyone who comes into my feed, I've seen them before, or it just basically they aren't getting anywhere with it. And so that's really, that's a really kind of cruel message when you think about it. It's just kind of saying that you're kind of old and boring now. You've been on the app for too long, which means you aren't new and exciting, which means the app's telling you that you're kind of not good enough to find a partner who's just joined up. So basically kind of reinforcing this message to people that the longer you're single, the longer you are to be alone and you're stuck alone, kind of. But then I do think these dating apps are just reinstating, as a society, I guess, things that we already do or think anyway, because I know you were saying like the commonality of like if you meet someone through a friend, I completely agree with that. But if you're in a bar, or say you bump into someone, I don't know, in a supermarket, wherever you meet people, people still are shallow. People are shallow. We go.
You both reached for the milk. It was so romantic.
You going for the slab of cheese? That would be my dream.
You're like, oh my God, you like cheddar too?
That would be
we
my
should
dream.
Get married.
But basically, I think everyone's a little, as a society, we have kind of a certain beauty standard anyway. So I think a lot of people are attracted to people off their looks in general anyway. However, I do agree with you on the point of there's something there a bit more that you have with a real life interaction than you do over a screen. Like I know people, and I've said it myself, there's people I've met in real life that I've dated that I may have swiped left on the app, which is really rude. That sounds really rude, but I know sometimes men don't take as good pictures as women. Sorry, men, but
that's true.
So they don't always do themselves justice. But also, I think when you go on, but basically when you go on these things, it just wait, I've lost my train of thought now. What was I saying? Oh yeah, that basically I do agree with your point about how that I'm sure it is a low percentage on these apps compared to how many people on these apps swiping day in and day out. Because I know some people are on these apps like that it's like it's Instagram or something. They're on all the time swiping and use them for multiple dates. But I'm sure like the actual success rate is still pretty low.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I totally agree with you that, if you think about people you've been on dates with or that you have dated or been in relationships with, that you most likely would have swiped left on an app. I definitely relate to that. And I think most people would. But yeah, I think, even if you think about meeting somebody at a bar, yes, a lot of it would be that, maybe they see you and they think you're attractive, or you see them and you think they're attractive. But I think the bar still gives you the chance to make an entrance, right? And maybe you can impress somebody, or maybe like both of your groups of friends meet at a bar, and you have more opportunities to interact than you do on these apps. Of course, in these apps, if you're like, oh, you took a bad picture, I think you're wearing a weird t-shirt, or why is there a dog in all your pictures? Is that your sister or your ex? Swipe left. You're not even giving them the chance to actually talk to you. Or even the fact that it's so hard to have the beginning of the conversation on these apps, right? Through text message with a person you've never met before. It's quite hard sometimes. Like, I think it takes a special talent to be able to catch somebody's attention within the first one or two turns of a conversation.
Okay, no, I completely agree on that. I think in general it's hard to convey messages via text because you can't tell tone of voice or emotion. So yeah, having that with a complete stranger, you could take it many ways. You could, oh, what a weirdo, or oh wait, this person seems cool. But even so, you don't really know them. So I still do find the whole concept of online dating strange. And then add in like the algorithm and how it filters kind of through people is wild. So I will be interesting to monitor and see how Japan do with this whole AI matchmaking. But I think it's a shame.
Yeah.
I do think it's a real shame that the government would, like you said, rather pump money into that than actually getting to the root of the issue, which would maybe giving women more rights at work, better maternity leave, so that they actually could have the chance to have a family. So there's obvious this is kind of just a plaster solution that they're not really getting to the root of it.
Yeah, I really can't imagine that the problem is that people in Japan just don't want to get kinky together. I can't imagine that's the reason. So I don't know how far a dating app would take them, but I'm very curious for the actual like implementation of the apps. Like, what is going to be the features? Are the apps going to like match you with someone based on your interest, on your social media use, on your looks somehow? Because I think, you know, all these things can be important. And also, how does it kind of internalize your values? Because I think that's an important thing in, you know, for people, especially for successful relationships, if you want to have a child. So these are not, right, this isn't the government helping you to get laid, I guess. They actually want people to have, well, I guess they could maybe be trying to make, this could be, I'm going off the rails here. What I mean is that, you know, if they're wanting to make long-lasting couples, then they'll need to find a way to match people based on values. And I don't know if they're going to do it through social media, if it's going to be something where you have to sign up and fill in a form, and then how is it different from something like OkCupid or Match.com? Is that still a thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, the article does state that they are going to be taking into account like people's age, their values, their morals, their work background, so their hobbies, that kind of
their work background,
that kind of thing. So
it's very interesting. I think, okay, if you're taking into account people's work background
and their income,
right? So are you only going to get matched with people who make about the same money as you? Are they going like?
Well, I think if you look at it in one sense, I guess if you want to look at it very, I guess, shallow level, I guess they're assuming like, say you earn loads of money and work in a bank, you would only be suited for working someone earning loads of money in a bank because you work similar hours, and that means you would have similar interests, which is not always the case at all. But that's how I can imagine the thought process. Or if you're, you know, working at the checkout in a shop, then you would also want to work with someone who's doing the similar job. But I don't think that's really how it works in terms of people coming together. But I can't imagine them getting really thinking deeper into it than this. But maybe they will.
I know, but that's, I mean, that I'm very curious about, because I also wonder if they'll try to enforce. I mean, you know, and I think culturally we're so okay with women being stay-at-home parents and not earning an income, that I wonder if the app will also, whatever AI thing they're developing, will also kind of enforce that, or because then how can they measure? Is it going to be one thing that like you opt in to date somebody who is like economically below you, quote unquote?
Yeah, it's very the whole concept's quite wild. I just still can't believe that this would be a solution to an obvious gender disparity, but it seems to be so. Also,
wow,
we're coming up on our time, I've seen.
Okay, I mean, we'll talk about this again if when this happens, when we find out more about the algorithms, because I'm extremely curious, and maybe in one other episode we can discuss more at length the implications of AI getting, you know, meddling with our love lives.
Yeah, actually, that one of my friends did ask if we could speak a bit more about like beauty standards and AI dating apps. I was like, that would be an interesting one.
That would be a very interesting episode. So we definitely welcome any topic suggestions, any input. If you're listening to this episode and you totally don't agree with us, or you think we missed something, or you totally agree with us, and you can tweet us at Let's Chat Ethics.
And we actually have a few exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, which we're excited for you to hear. And we've got a Christmas special coming up where we will be drinking mulled wine and discussing the kind of goods and bads of AI ethics of 2020.
Yes, so join us next week. Join us next week for a tipple and some ethics and some lovely libations. Maybe some mince pies.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm basically making mince pies at this point.
But I'm basically going to be made of mulled wine after Christmas. We'll speak to you. We'll see you then, guys.
Bye.